We've had several great conversations today. We had one earlier with Finance Joe, and of course, he was talking about how things are going in the finance world. And of course, we did give you some of the information about our mystery guest. And then we had a very enlightening conversation with Tamina Watson before she had to run off to a meeting and all of that. So, definitely some great conversations, and looking forward to having another one with a friend with some North Carolina roots. So, looking forward to have a conversation with somebody involved with the filmmaking community. And y'all know I'm a big fan of the filmmaking community and all of that, having worked as a judge. As a matter of fact, I've got to finish judging this week the Out South, which used to be having another name and everything film festival, because they want to get the viewpoints of people from all kinds of backgrounds, meaning all kinds of ethnicities, all kinds of orientations, and everything else. So I've been judging that now. I believe this will be my first year of that one, whereas I judge Nevermore as well. So definitely some great conversations, and looking forward to having another one as I learn more about the filmmaking world, according to Miss Bedford and what she's been doing in that filmmaking community. So I'm going to bring Shirley in, and she's definitely got an amazing organization that she's trying to get more of us, and particularly more women of color, into filmmaking and into a number of other things. And we do know that sometimes we do not do a good enough job of creating our own stories, and we let other folks tell our stories. And I am definitely a fan of us telling our own stories. You have to wonder what some of those other films would have looked like if we had been the ones telling them instead of some of the other parts of society. But definitely there have been some great films that we have had a chance to tell our story as well. So I'm going to bring in Cheryl Bedford with the Women of Color United. And of course, we've also had the pleasure of talking on Clubhouse, as that's become my new favorite place to go at everything along those lines. So here to bring Cheryl in and have a great conversation with her and see what she's got going on in her life. So how are you doing, Cheryl? How's everything going? I know you've got 1,001 things going on, always involved in a number of things, always doing some amazing things in society and all of that, and always stirring up things on Clubhouse. So I like to stir up things as well. So that's always a fun thing in that regard. So definitely, I know that we've discovered that you actually got some relative that now lives in North Carolina. So if you'll share a little bit about to our international audience about your own story and about how you even got involved in the whole filmmaking community and the whole entertainment community. But it sounds like you're doing some very powerful work. And I know we talked briefly on that Zoom call, and I got to learn a little bit about you. Totally fascinated by you, and think that you're just a wonderful individual, and look forward to learning even more about you.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's going on 4:30 in Los Angeles. So first of all, yes, Charlotte, for those who are watching in the area, my aunt is Mary C. Curtis. I know she's on a local station there. She also does podcasts. She's a very well-known journalist. So that is my aunt. She's also my godmother. And I, in turn, am her son's godmother. So, we just keep it in the family. In my family. So yeah, that is, she is my mother's youngest sister. My mom passed away in February of 2016. And so, yeah, that's who she is. So what would you like to know?
Well, definitely I want to know about this Women of Color organization and about your own use of Clubhouse, and just a little bit about just the whole world of Cheryl, because like I said, it just seems like you've been doing a lot of things. So I'm sure the folks would be wanting to know even more about the amazing things that you're doing. I guess we can start off talking about, because I know there was a time that a lot of folks were thinking that we were not getting enough both representation in our own African American stories, of us telling our own stories, even though, of course, there have been films where some of our stories are coming out, like Hidden Image, and definitely we know that there have been some other earlier versions as well, but there's so many stories that aren't on the big screen. And I know that you would love to see those on the big screen. I know that we just had the Tulsa riots, and I don't know if there's been a big screen version of Tulsa. I know there's been a big screen in the sense of documentaries and independent films version of Wilmington and our own Wall Street here in Durham, but I haven't seen enough of those kind of stories being told. And I also know that you're an advocate for trying to get more women of color involved in filmmaking as well. So if you could talk a little bit about that advocacy work, I'm sure folks would be fascinated by that.
Sure. So first of all, I have a BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from NYU Film School, Tisch School of the Arts. And I have a Master of Fine Arts degree from the American Film Institute. So the important thing about both of those is when I went to NYU, it was the #1 film school in the country. When I went to the American Film Institute, it was the #1 film school in the country. And when I got graduated, though less than 200 people in the entire world had a master's degree from the American Film Institute, I could not get a job.
Wow.
Because of systemic racism and sexism, right?
Right.
Dark skin. I lost a bunch of weight at the time. I was fat. I was young. I couldn't get a job. Could not get a job. Every place that I went to, every studio that I went to, threw one of those diversity, equity, and inclusion forms at me back in the day when you actually had to fill one out. And I read it and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And what I meant by that is I'm not gonna jump through hoops. I am not your animal. I am not your pet. And so I went out and made a living as a hard living at first, as an independent filmmaker. That's what I did. And so I just worked on a whole bunch of features and shorts, producing, line producing. I did one film as a production manager, and from then on, I was a line producer and a producer. Later on, I taught. I taught at New York Film Academy. I was the very first chair of diversity development. Taught the art of line producing at UCLA Extension. 80% of my movies sold. And then I became Bill Duke's producer for years. And a lot of people know me from the documentary Dark Girls. And so, yeah, that's what I did. I've worked in digital content. I worked at Awesomeness TV. I was a senior line producer. But I made my own way. Lo and behold, I always say that I am a producer, line producer by trade. I am an activist by DNA. My mother was an activist and statistician. Her two older brothers, my Uncle Tony and my Uncle Thomas, both marched during that original March on Washington. My mother was in the sign tent so I'm originally from Maryland, so from Baltimore. And so when people came to the march, they didn't bring their own signs. My mom was in the sign tent making signs. My uncle Thomas, who is now a retired judge in Baltimore, he was in the communications tent. He also helped pass the Americans with Disabilities Act. And my Uncle Tony and his GTO ran errands. Neither my Uncle Tony nor my mother are with us now. But I always say I'm an activist by DNA. So
I know about that activism by DNA. I've got something similar. My dad actually was Air Force, but he was not really your typical military because I don't think he really liked the military. But it's his way out or whatever, or maybe he fell into that, wanted to go around the world, travel and everything. But I do know he was very active and is still active to some degree in civil rights and things along those lines, along with being an artist. But he was also one of the creators of the Malcolm X School, which was here in Durham, and that was around like in the late 60s, early 70s, and he was definitely one of the creators because I was a young student at the time going to school, and I remember writing one of those, I'll just put it bluntly, it was basically a kill and that W word kind of poem and everything. And I'm convinced to this day that my dad still has that poem somewhere in the file cabinet, and he's going to use it as blackmail should I ever decide to do anything that he doesn't approve of or anything along those lines. So I know that they're just still floating around there. I think it's floating around in his file cabinet along with some old grades and everything of that nature. So I'm sure that if I'm careful, he'll probably pull it out and be like, if I come with some friends of mine that don't quite feel the mold of what he thinks they should fit, he might be like, did you know that Mark was this radical back in the day and everything? So I think that parents sometimes carry that evidence and all of that just to mess with us. And I'm sure that maybe your aunt and some of your relatives may have some of those papers as well.
Yeah, no, they don't. Anyway, I'm too slick for that. No, honestly, my family is very, very close. So my Aunt Janice just finished her, the last time I was in Durham, she was being installed as the president of the National Association of Black Storytellers. So yeah, I mean, that's what I tell people. So the important thing about graduating with a master's degree. So that happened. And one other thing happened. A friend of mine was like, hey, let's go to this industry Christmas party. And it was like $50. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but back in the day, in the early 90s, I could get 2 weeks worth of groceries for $50.99. So I was like, no. He's like, oh, no, I'll pay for you. And I remember going, we were two of the only Black people there. And I was like, oh, this is where deals get made. This is where the networking goes. I didn't have any cards back then. People were handing out cards. And I was like, oh, I get it. So between those two incidences, I swore to myself, I'm like, if I ever get the chance. Cut to February of 2018. I borrowed my friend's house. His name is Kelly Perrine. He's an actor. A lot of people would know him from One-on-One. And I borrowed his house. And what I did was I just wanted to get together all the women of color that I knew in the entertainment industry. And the reason was because as an independent producer, I'd always hired marginalized people. I always hired people who look like me. And so 50 became 75, and they could bring other women of color. 150 women showed up. And I had decided before, a few days before, that I'm not the type of person just to sit around and complain about something. Like, I'm always about action. Right. And I decided to put all of those women in a Google Doc and start sending it out. And I named it the JTC list. It's named after my mother, Joan Teresa Curtis. So right there on the spot, 93 women showed up. That was the first event. The second event I threw, we were about 250. I was working at Awesomeness at the time. They lent me their building that they had at the time. And it was for us and our allies. And I noticed something. People were getting hired on the spot. And I was like, I get it. Lists are like phone books to white people in the industry. Yep. Like, they're like, I don't know what to do with this list because we're so relationship driven. But if you could get those who could hire, fund, and distribute in the same room, that's where the magic happens. So I spent 2 years of my own money going broke, drained my savings account, maxed out my credit cards, all of that thing, to build all of these events. And people started getting hired. And I was like, I'm on to something. Couldn't get Hollywood to donate anything, right? Then came a pandemic. Then came the rebellion. And all of a sudden, all of these people who had been to our events were like, well, we got to hire marginalized people. We know where to go. Why? Because they had been in the same room. Yeah. And then they started to trust the list. And then they started to send out the list. And then the list went from a Google Doc onto Airtable, right? And then I partnered with Tope Nowen of Bitch Pack. So she had this idea, and it was called Start with 8 Hollywood. She had come out of the VC world, where 8, that was a number for them. And what she wanted was for people in the industry to mentor 8 women of color, right? She got Cassie and Elways, the producer, and then she tagged me because it exploded. Because she's a screenwriter. I'm a producer. Having built a department from scratch, we turned it into a program. Now, 2 rounds in Hollywood, 1 round in Canada. We've gotten over 1,000 women of color mentors in the entertainment industry. People are getting hired. People are getting their projects funded, their content distributed. And here we go. We just launched the 3rd round in Hollywood. Now we call it Start with 8, Hollywood edition, Canada edition. And we just added the UK. So it'll be the 3rd round in Hollywood, the 2nd round in Canada, and the very 1st round in the UK. Here's the interesting thing. With all the success we've had, can't get Hollywood to donate anything. Nothing.
Wow. Nothing. And that's one thing I was going to ask you, because I know one of the arguments that I've heard from people for years is that, they see the successes, and I may not agree with all of the successes, and I'll explain part of that in the question. Like, they'll see Oprah, and I've definitely seen that Oprah's done some amazing things, excuse me, with her Harpo Studios and everything. And they'll also see Tyler Perry. to some degree, Tyler Perry to me is, and I know different people have different attitudes, but to me, some of his acts is a little bit too much like Amos and Andy and Step In and Fetch It, but that's just my opinion and everything. But they'll see those as great successes, and they'll wonder with all the wealth and success that we've had in the Hollywood, in entertainment, with our talent, why more of that talent isn't doing more productions and doing more things. I mean, they'll definitely see Bill Duke teaching courses, but they don't necessarily see the studios, or they'll see the studios and they're not doing as successfully as quote unquote folks think they should be doing. And I'm thinking about like Tim Reed, and even here in North Carolina, we had Phaedra Blackwell that actually tried to run what was the old De Laurentiis studio, and he had Pinnacle there in Yanceyville. Of course, Yanceyville's in the middle of nowhere, so that might have stopped. Been part of his problem was its location, because they do say location, location, location for just about everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts about why we don't have more power than we should have, because it seems to me that we've got as much talent and as much wealth as some of the folks that do have that power that are in Hollywood or in Broadway or a number of these other places.
Sorry, I tend to jump in when people start. Sorry, because there are a lot of fallacies, right? So first of all, if you can name them, we don't have enough. So you just named a couple of people. We could add probably Spike to that. We could add Ava DuVernay. But if you can name them, there are not enough. Because if I sat here and named every white male, we'd be here all goddamn day. Right. So first of all, that is the fallacy. Every time somebody throws one, I'm like, if you can name them, they're not enough. That normally stops people in their tracks. That's the first thing. And because you can name them, though it seems that their wealth, that wealth can't compare to the wealth of white people in this industry.
Right.
It can't even come close.
Right.
It cannot even come close. Right.
Agreed.
And that's part of the problem. So when we created Women of Color Unite, so that second event when we were 250 people and I couldn't get anybody to fund us, right? So here's the thing with Women of Color Unite. I don't charge anything. I don't believe in it. I think that's one of the ways that white women run groups have kept us marginalized within Hollywood. So I ask people to donate what they can when they can. If we help them emotionally, mentally, physically, psychologically, mentally. And so that's, that's why I went broke for a couple of years. But then we did hashtag Start With A. And we had a lot of success. Here's why I don't mind putting my foot up Hollywood's ass every day.
No, that's right.
when after the first round of hashtag Start With A, we sent out a form. Because we wanted to know how to get this right? The original one was just a Twitter movement. How do you build on that? So we asked people what they got out of it, what we could do better, all of that. 76% of the women said that the main thing we gave them was hope. And I started reading studies from the National Institute of Health about what systemic racism and sexism and the intersectionality could do. And I got angry.
No, that's right.
I got real angry. And I that's why I just put my foot up Hollywood's ass every day. I think all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs should completely be dismantled. First off, why are we asking the oppressor to help the oppressed? Secondly of all, they left $10 billion on the table. Now, I don't know another place where executives could leave $10 billion on the plate and still have their jobs.
Wow.
And then they're going to give us $100 million. Netflix, Time Warner, $100 million. But you leave $10 billion on the table, but you want to give us $100 million. So here's the thing. I don't want a seat at your table. Your table was literally built on the backs of enslaved African on the land of the indigenous. Why would I want a seat at your table? Because what you do is you're like, oh, we're going to have this one black person. Oh, but now it's Stop Asian Hate. Get rid of that black person. Let's bring in the Asian person. Oh, but today it's about the disabled. Let's get rid of the Asian person. Because you are the one who decide how many of us sit at that table. But your entire wealth is built on my ancestors. Get the fuck out of here. Nah, bro. I'm not feeling it. So I make deals with, like, we have a deal with Genre TV. It's run by, it's premiering on Roku. It's run by 2 Black women who work in distribution. Are we going to make a lot of money? Probably not. But here's what I know. The women who belong to my group, it's a licensing fee. So you still own your content. These women work in international distribution. You have a chance of having your stuff internationally distributed. We, as an organization, we take 15%. Why? Because we're the ones who are going through it, all of that type of stuff. After that, and that's off the top. Then after that, it is a 70-30 split, meaning the women get 70% from the advertising revenue. And then the women who own it, Hudson Sterling, they get 30. So we're going to have quarterly 2 blocks of programming. One, Women of Color Unite members only. The second one, we leave no marginalized group behind. So it can have, subject matter can be something like sizeism, ableism, something like that. And it can come from all marginalized people. Though to start, it'll still probably be the majority of our members, because I want to see how it goes before we put in all of that effort to bring in other people. Just because my staff doesn't get like, they get paid every now and then if I get a small grant in. So even with the success of #StartWith8, which we've just launched, Getting Mentors, and it's going really well. I'm very, very proud of my staff. And we have some amazing people who are coming in as mentors this round. We don't charge for it. But the amount of women we can handle is directly proportional to the amount of mentors that we get. We'll be able to do 600 in the US again. Here's the interesting thing. Because we proved what we could do. So we went from 293 women signed up in February of 2018. April of 2018, we were at 250. A year later, we were around 600. Next year, by the time we hit 2020, because that was 2019, we were about 600. That's when we did the very first study of women of color in entertainment. So to belong to our group, you don't have to pay, but you do have to fill out forms. Those forms give us the largest study. Here's the interesting thing. I took all of our stats, I wrapped it in a pretty little package, and I took it to Netflix and Apple and Sony and Amazon, and they all blew me off. See, I thought I was doing something because I took our stats. I looked at National Institute of Health, put it together. I'm like, hey, here's the problem in Hollywood. Here's how to solve it. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, you just don't give a shit.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay.
You say that because one thing, Cheryl, that I've been seeing more and more people doing is with the pandemic, we're seeing more and more people running their own networks, running their own ideas, running their own, like, for lack of a better term, distributions and all of that. Because definitely it seems very fascinating how folks are handling this and everything. Because I've even seen people that have, I've got a friend of mine, he's doing a business Olympics or a business expo. It's really what it amounts to. He's got over 100 speakers and everything. He's been doing that for about I think he's on day 3 or day 4. So it's about a week-long conference. And this is his 3rd or 4th time doing that. It's because he discovered this platform that we're on, and he's like using it and using other platforms. But I just wondered, do you think that people are seeing ways to level the playing field, and because of some of the things that are available to us, and that we're using them in the ways that we could, or is it a uphill battle that we will never win? But I'm seeing more and more people. He's just one example. I think there's a network out of Florida as well that's an African-owned network, and definitely it seems like more of us are using computers and technology to level the playing field and create our own, show places that we can do our own studios, because the distribution model has changed.
Yeah, here's the thing. Because of Roku and other things and other platforms, you don't need to go to Netflix. I've sold stuff on Netflix, I don't pay. So, but there are other platforms now. There are other ways to monetize your content. But here's the thing that I always tell people. You have to change your definition of success. Our definition of success is deeply rooted in white supremacy. The house, the car, as long as I can pay my bills, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, as long as I can pay my bills and I don't have to be beholden to anybody. And that, I will tell you, that was the thing when I started building Women of Color Unite. They were like, oh shit, she didn't go away. Nah, I didn't go away. And here's the best part. I'm not beholden to anybody, because none of those people helped me with my career. So I can tell off Universal the same way I can tell off Sony, the same way I can tell off Apple. I can tell them all off, because I'm not beholden to any of them. I really do think that they don't fund us because they're like, is she going to go away? No, because here's the thing. I'm not going to go away, because what they never count on is the sweat equity of women of color and our allies. I can always get volunteers to help us. My members will volunteer. So that 600 that I wrapped up, then a year later comes #StartWith8. We're at 1,200. By September of 2020, we were at 1,800. We redid the survey, broke down the problem, because the problem is actually a union problem. Broke it down by union, laid it all out, put it on our website. I'm like, see what the problem is? We partner with the Casting Society of America. We started partnering with people who are like, we want to do some stuff. I'm like, I got you. So we started partnering with people, all of that type of thing. That was September of 2020. We had 1,800 members. Today, we just crossed 4,000.
Wow.
Here's the other thing. Because I asked for donations, we don't make a lot of money, but we definitely are doing okay, just from the sheer volume, right? And we do a lot more than that. We have our own gig board, because the fact is, because of all the work that I had done previously, in this push for equity, for diversity, inclusion, equity, and let us not forget accessibility for our disabled members, we get gigs all the time before they go up, before they're put out in the public. We have a gig board. We work with film festivals. All the women who wanted to apply for the Toronto International Film Festival, they just did all of their stuff for free. They didn't have to pay the applications. We get anywhere from a 100% discount to like 20%, depending upon the film festival. We're an entire community, right? Like I said, we're about to launch this thing on Juneteenth with Genre TV, where a bunch of members or stuff is going to appear. Are they going to make a lot of money? Probably not, but they'll probably make a buy yourself something pretty money, right? And here's the other thing. Once you get distribution the first time, it's easier to get it the next time. And then it gets easier the next time, right? And so I'm not necessarily about just working for the system. And mind you, when I put my foot up their butt, I'm talking about getting people into the system. But both things can exist at the same time. Because really what I'm about is building generational wealth. So what we didn't realize that until about 9 months after we officially became a nonprofit, so the JTC list came first. By the end of 2018, we had become officially a nonprofit. And so, but that very first invitation said women of color, ... and then all caps, unite. And that's what I decided to call the actual organization, right? And so, but I think about it. So when we did the nonprofit, our mission statement, if you read our mission statement very closely, what it says is we can be a nonprofit production studio.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've been starting to build a slate and go after getting money to do our slate, which would be tax deductible as long as it sticks to our mission statement. Yeah, and here's the other thing. There are nonprofit studios around the world when the government funds them. Because of capitalism, we just don't see it a lot here. But there are a couple that also exist. I do want to tell you, I found them on Clubhouse, and they're both run by Black women, which I find very interesting. So I'm about hitting it from all sides. I don't think it's just one approach that works, right? So we send out the JTC list so that, and people are wondering, it's not a searchable database. And what I mean by that is you have to request it. So when people request it, but that way we can keep track of it. So if, for instance, Disney will say, well, we looked, but we couldn't find any. Cheryl will be like, we sent it to you on this date, this person. So we keep track of that. Because what the industry has always been very good at is two very specific things: a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability. So that's what we run this entire organization on: transparency and accountability. I don't say to you or anybody else or in Clubhouse or in any other forum something that wouldn't say to somebody, right? There is nothing that I will not say to some. I've said to white women who are running stuff, I'm like, you do realize that you are the biggest recipients of affirmative action, right? Because of whiteness, right? Because when a lot of women in the industry, white women, want to act like we're all together, I'm like, let me go back and show you what has happened over the years regarding women of color. Right. So it's not like I'll say something to you that I wouldn't say to somebody in the C-suite at a studio, which I have. I remember I had a conversation with Paul Martin and Brett King over at Sony when we first started. They're like, Cheryl, what do you want? And I was like, I'd like $2 million. And they're like, we don't have that kind of money. And that was the first time I realized the studios don't actually fund their diversity, equity, and inclusion side. They don't. So, and I looked at them dead in the face. There were like 7 of them around the table and me. You can't intimidate. Like, I know what I know. And so I looked, they're like, we don't have that kind of money. And I actually looked at all of them and said, why not? You're fucking Sony.
They didn't have an answer for that, did they?
No, I don't have a problem because they're not funded, right? And that's the problem. That's why I think that most diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in Hollywood are just full of shit. And here's the thing. If it's really built on meritocracy, Women of Color Unite wins. Because I've done more on no money than you've done with all the millions and millions and millions of dollars and so forth and so on. And 2, all the Black people and BIPOC people who are in there, do I think when they first started that they really thought that they would be able to do something? Absolutely. But at what point do you stop being part of the solution and start being part of the problem? I say part of the problem, right? Like I say, because I think what white supremacy does is it puts faces like ours in charge of shit, but they don't actually get any money. They don't get any money. They still get to vet. They still get to gatekeep. And here is the thing that I find very interesting. When I was a little kid, and so for all those who know, like Baltimore, Maryland, my mother and I, we were driving, and we drove down Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, you have to understand, this is like late 70s, early 80s, right? And so there were all these guys out on the street, selling their wares, the cassettes out of the car, the jewelry that they stole from some goddamn place, all of that kind of stuff, right? And my mother went into this whole thing when we got home, and she's like, let me tell you what I'm going to do. Went into what these guys were doing on the street. And when she stopped, she looked at me and she said, every last single one of them could be a CEO and CFO if it wasn't for systemic racism. She said, you aren't special. You just happen to have a family who gave you an education, right? Because I've gone to private school all my life. She said, You understand that, though. You're not special. And what she meant by that is that when white supremacy pats a few of us on the head and they go, oh, we deem you worthy, to push back on that, because all my people are worthy.
Right. I definitely agree with you. I love your fiery spirit, and I agree with you. And I think we need more radicals like Cheryl out in society. But one of the things I was going to say is I've had conversations on this show and on a number of other shows that I've done, including some of my friends, about the role of arts and activism. I actually think that there needs to be even more arts and activism and all of that. But I just wanted to know your thoughts and everything.
Absolutely. I think artists, I think by just, look, everybody doesn't have to be me. And what I mean by that is because I don't owe anybody, because I do come from an activist. My mother was also a statistician. So she told me, you'll know what's in the hearts and minds of white people, don't even try, but what you can do is break things down to the lowest common denominator. And what that lets them know is right? And that's what I do. Like, is somebody racist or sexist, or are they just working within the system? I don't know. Like, I'm not going to sit there and try to figure it out. I'm not going to sit there and make you feel better, make you feel worse. What I will do is break down our statistics. right? And as my friend, Dr. Jolie Proudfit of Native Media Strategy says, it is about narrative sovereignty, nothing
Mm-hmm.
about us without us. So yes, art art has the ability to change hearts and minds. That is why we can no longer let those who don't look like us tell our stories. And I just don't mean in front of I mean producers, directors, writers, but I also mean below the line, meaning cinematographers, grips, electrics, costume, hair. Here's the interesting thing, because you always hear about how Black women, actresses, like sometimes they have to go in and do their own hair. And I use this as an example. For years, my makeup artist was Kathy Madison. God rest her soul. She unfortunately passed away from breast cancer. Kathy was my makeup artist for years. She was a Black makeup artist. Why? Because she could do both Black and white. So I use this as an example because I'm like, you do realize whether we're talking producers, or whether we're talking writers, or whether we're talking executives, because of the fact that we have always had to see things through that white male, straight, cisgender gaze, we can all write, direct, produce, light, do costumes, makeup for white people. They can't do the same for us. Just like the disabled community can write about those of us who aren't, but the opposite is not true. So here's a radical thought, especially since all these people left $10 billion on the table. In Clubhouse, somebody said, Cheryl, what would you do if you were in charge? I'm like, fire them all. What other? And I was the only one who said it. And I'm like, wait. Y'all think we can actually work? Right. These people failed the fuck up.
So
Wow.
Cheryl, it sounds like you're saying that they did almost as bad as Trump did, because Trump definitely failed every business that I'm aware of, and he also failed the country. So were we really surprised when he ran the country into the dilemma that he ran it into, when I can name at least 7 or 8 businesses that he also ruined, including Taj Mahal, the casino, that is.
Interesting you would say that, because when I went around with my stats and I put in a nice little PDF and we sent it to everybody and I'm sitting there having the meetings, this is a thought that came to mind. I actually said it out loud. I was like, oh, you know how much money you're leaving on the table. Because like we as marginalized people, we knew how much money they were leaving on the table before the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, or whomever said it was. And I was like, oh, white trumps green. So when I'm on Clubhouse and I hear people like, oh, it's all about the money. No, it's not. It was never about the money. Can we stop saying that and making marginalized people feel like, if you just work harder now? Because that's bull. The white trumps green. And when I said that, he was still in power. And they just looked at me because, Hollywood thinks it's liberal. And I just looked at him, I was like, yeah, for you, white trumps green. And I meant that in every word, every sense of those 3 words, white trumps green, right? Because in the state of California, when a company is run by a woman of color, profits go up by as much as 30%. So why aren't more women of color running stuff? When women of color run stuff, you don't need a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. We're the only ones who hire the way that the world looks. When you hire the way the world looks, your actual workforce puts out 33% more.
Cheryl, you bring up 2 interesting questions, and I'd love to hear your counter to an argument that I've heard from some friends of mine and everything about business. But before I get to that argument and everything, because you bring up some very fascinating points that I'm just interested in delving deeper into. So I'm gonna get to one of the business things I've heard business people say in the business community. But before I get to that, I've also heard, and you've alluded to it a couple of times, when they talk about the marginalized communities. And one of the things that seems to go on all the time is they pit us against each other. And even though we know there's enough money for everybody. So, we had the Latin movement, and we know that there's definitely some injustices going on with the border. So after Black Lives Matter, we went from Black Lives Matter to the border issues, which was our Latin brothers. And then we went to Asia because of what's going on with the virus, and they're being blamed or not blamed, and some other incidents that are happening. This is Pride Month. So then we go to the folks that are in the LGBTI, whatever other letters they've got, community and everything. So what did we do in the sense of actually being more engaged?
First of all, it's LGBTQIA+. And I obviously obviously I know it because we leave no marginalized group behind. Here's the problem. They keep pitting us against each other. I don't play that game. I will not play that game. Right? That's my thing. I don't play that game. I'm not about to. I don't want to. It is never going to happen. You cannot make me fight somebody from the disabled community, somebody from the Asian community, or the intersection thereof, or from the LGBTQIA plus community. You can't make me fight them for your crumbs. Because here's the thing. Fuck your crumbs. I want the whole goddamn pie. Period. I'm not fighting somebody. I'm not fighting somebody from another marginalized group. I'm not going to do it. You can't make me. I fight for all, though we're Women of Color Unite. We have a saying, we leave no marginalized group behind. And so I will use whatever cachet I have to help fight for all other marginalized people. Like I'm not playing. This is about understanding how deeply rooted all this stuff is in white supremacy. And it's about picking it out of our brains, our hearts, and our souls, our spirit, right? I'm not playing this game. You can't make me. You can't make me fight somebody. Now the industry has its money for Stop Asian Hate. And Taupe, remember, we do hashtag start with 8 together. Taupe was like, you do realize that 20 to 30% of the women who have taken part in this have been Asian. So Taupe's like, give us money. And then they take a look at this blackface, right? Because I'm actually, that's one of our programs under Women of Color Unite. And they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to fund you. And I'm like, I'm not fighting Asians for your fund. I'm like, fine. You cannot make me fight another marginalized person. Now, here's the other thing that I do know. And I have this conversation with the Asian community, with the Latinx community, with other Mina Swana, which is Middle Eastern North African, Southwest Asian North African. Here's the other thing and I have real conversations with all of these people and the leaders of these other marginalized groups. Here's the thing. You have all benefited from anti-Blackness. Mm-hmm. All of this comes down to anti-Blackness, because the one thing that you were taught when you came to this country was that you need to be as far away from Black people as possible. If that weren't true, then we wouldn't have colorism issues in other countries. If that weren't true, we would know that 25% of all Latinx are actually Afro-Latinx. You wouldn't know it from content, though, right? Mm-hmm. Every other group has benefited from anti-Blackness. So while I have no problem, we leave no marginalized group behind, you have to talk to your communities about their anti-Blackness, right? Because everybody expects Black people to help them, right? Everybody expects that from us. We are the only group. Think about this for a second. So I have said previously that, and I noticed that right after the Derek Chauvin trial, I was in a room on Clubhouse with other Black people in the entertainment industry. And they were like, we're really glad for the trial, but no, I love white people too, but it's been really traumatic, but no, I'm not saying I hate white people. And I said to everybody, you need to stop. This is how indoctrinated we are. I said, so there's always been this tiny little carrot, the white people. And when I say that, I mean white supremacy, right? That they have dangled. It's like, you put us first and you may get the corner office. You put us first, you may get the big house. You put us first and you may, not that you will, but you may. But the flip side to that is if you don't, you will be punished for it. If you don't, you could be killed for it. If you don't, you could be murdered for it. So I understand why we always couch everything we say with, but I love you too. Here's the thing, I don't. And the funniest thing is my fiance is white. I love him, but I put Black people first. And here's the thing. Why is that such a problem? Do we expect Latinos to put Black people first? No. Do we expect Asians to put us first? No. How come we are the only group that everybody else comes to, and we are expected to put them first? We're expected to put out our cachet, our time, our effort for all of their, marching. Here's the thing. It's not that I mind that, but I need them to understand that they have benefited from anti-Blackness. And here's the thing. I put my people first. I'm always going to put my people first, because history and statistics tell me I'd be a goddamn fool to put white people first. I do not love you all. I love my people. My people can hurt me in a place white people can't touch, because I do not do this one thing. I do not give white people the benefit of the doubt, because white supremacy has told us they always get the benefit of the doubt. We're always supposed to understand. We're supposed to go, yeah, I know you're a good person, but this is how you do microaggressions. This is how you're a little racist or a little biased or a little, no, stop. I put my people first, right? I'm going to put my people first. And I do not give white people the benefit of the doubt. I had this conversation with Emily Best, who's CEO of Seed and Spark, the most successful crowdfunding program. She's one of the only white women I will fuck.
Yeah, I know Seed and Spark.
Nah, Emily's great. And so Emily and I actually had this conversation when the first time Trump, yeah. So we had this conversation. And I said, here is the problem with people who really want to do something. I said, you tend to judge white people by your standards. In other words, you give them the benefit of the doubt. You have to understand that you're not, that stop. And she's like, oh my God. She's like, because I said to her, you're a unicorn. She said, I got it. It's my job to convince other white people that having a horn is cool. I said, that. Right? Stop judging people. Understand that you have a deeper understanding than most. Why? Because she's done the work, right? Delaney, who is our social media manager, Delaney and Vanessa have both been taking social justice classes. Delaney first, then Vanessa. Delaney's been doing this for over a year. I didn't even fucking know about it, right? But she does the work. So, and I got this thing from Delaney, which is this. I'm not an ally. I practice my allyship every day so that I can be a co-conspirator. I don't need an ally. I need a co-conspirator, right? And the thing is, I don't see what's wrong with putting my people first, right? Like, I don't, but we're not even, remember all the pushback. What was it, Issa Rae, who said at the Emmys or whatever, they're like, who are you voting for? She's like, everybody Black. And she got so much pushback for it. Why?
Speaking of people getting pushback, and I actually got pushback from a young lady that I have dated and everything, speaking of relationships and things of that nature. But I've gotten pushbacks from a significant other and everything, and I will explain what the pushback is. One of them is that they feel that some of our activists have not gone through, because they went through the system. They were involved in politics and everything. So they feel that some of our activists have not, quote unquote, paid their dues. And they were talking about, because I'm actually a fan of AOC. They were talking about AOC, and they felt that AOC had not paid their dues going through the system. And they also sometimes wonder about race, because they feel that it's like the definition wise, it doesn't really exist, or at least that's the way they want to perceive it and everything. So what would your answer be to folks that want to put AOC and the squad in that box, saying that they haven't earned enough time because they are young guns, and they are young guns of color and everything, and also those folks that don't want to necessarily claim that they don't see color, or they claim that they don't see race, because they just want us to be one human race. So what would your answer be to folks like that?
Some of the young women who work from here around their ages. So that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is what AOC said about reparations and race and things like that, right? And I'm like, ooh, your proximity to whiteness has you a little fucked up, doesn't it? That's what I thought. So I don't judge somebody by their age. I think that that's ageist, right? Like, I'm not doing that. I have great allies who, Caden Phoenix, who runs the Chicana Directors Initiative. Like I said, Dr. Jolie Proudfit, who is indigenous, who runs Native Media Strategies. Like I got, the gamut, right? So I don't look at that or age or anything else. What I'm really paying attention to is what you say. And she gave such a crappy answer. When asked about reparations, when asked about, blackness and so forth and so on, like her answer didn't make any goddamn sense. So for me, it's not necessarily about age. It's about doing the work. You can be old.
I hadn't heard her comment about reparations, but I'm thinking most of the people in Puerto Rico, I think, have some African American ancestry, and I'm definitely down for Puerto Rican independence, or maybe even a Puerto Rican state, one or the other. I'm not decided. I'll be good with either one, but it does seem like they definitely have some African ancestry if they're true Puerto Ricans, and I think that is part of her ancestry. So if she's not down with reparations, I'll definitely have to study that, because it seems to me that she should be down with reparations, because there's a whole lot of, as you mentioned earlier, Afro population that is in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. So she did say she wanted reparations for community regarding the coronavirus, but it was, I'm going back. It was, yeah. So faces backlash for comments comparing. Where is this one? Comparing Latino's descent to Black. Yeah. She has definitely had. Yeah. So she was like statements on the Black Lives Matter movement where she equated African Americans and Latinas based on their descent, claiming that Latinos are Black. But it wasn't that. It was something that was a comment that she made to, it's on her timeline. I'll find it. Her answer was trash. And that's just it. Again, you can be young and have done the work, or you can be older and never have done the work. And so I'm just looking at people who actually do the work. That's what I am specifically looking for. So for me, it's not necessarily about it. Look, the very first time I marched, I was 2. It was the Baltimore riots, 1968. I was on my mama's hip, right? Like, I mean, it was the first time. It was not the last, right? So that's what I personally think, that it doesn't have anything to do with age. It has to do whether you are doing the work. And look, even the squad has had some moments, not saying, and I just wish that they would do more homework. Right. I mean, that's the thing. Look, we could sit here and talk about education, right? So over 80% of the teachers are white. 90% of principals and administration. That's a problem. Our school books were written by Daughters of the Confederacy. Why do you think that there's always been like a page?
It's interesting you said that.
And all they do is talk.
Sure, I'm sorry to bother you, but it's interesting you say that, because 2 of the founders of this particular network, Pod TV, formerly IBM TV, are white. Nick Palveda, who's I think of Greek descent, if I'm remembering his ancestry, and Kim Calhoun's probably Irish based on that last name. So they're definitely white, but they argue that we are, and then part of it is because they would like to see other things taught, but they argue that we are actually teaching in the 21st century with 18th century values. And I actually agree with them on that a lot of things that we are teaching are way back in the 18th century, and we need to actually come back with modern times.
Yes. I mean, that's why you would only find a blip about, you had something about slaves, and then you had something about Martin Luther King, maybe Rosa Parks was Sherman. That was it. There's a reason for it. You know what I'm saying? So all of these things. And then you have how Black women die in childbirth more. Hell, in the UK, dark-skinned Black women die at 3 times the rate of their light-skinned or biracial counterparts. Like it's all over. But here's the thing about content. Content is the thing that can change hearts and minds. That is why it is so important for narrative sovereignty. Period.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. We have to be in control of our own narratives. There's no doubt about that. Speaking of control of our own narratives, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. I've had the pleasure of talking to a couple of business women, and one of the things that they've been pushing for is for us to get out of this solo entrepreneur mindset, because too many of our businesses are solo, meaning that they're one man shops, maybe if it's a family, 2 or 3 man shops, but they're not doing a lot of hiring. So they're basically running as a lot of our businesses are, whether that's funeral homes or whether that's hair salons or a number of the businesses that we do regularly, that we're not doing enough hiring. So they find that a lot of people, I know that Danetta Watson, who runs this thing called the National Black Masterminds, talks about the hookup culture, and also what she says is the solopreneur kind of thing. And she says that there's a big difference between hookup culture and hustlers and those that are actually trying to make a difference in community. I know you mentioned generational wealth earlier. So I was wondering, do you think that we can move away from that solo entrepreneur mindset? And if so, how can we do it? And if not, why not?
Of course we can. But, I think that, so people are starting entrepreneurs. The majority are Black women, right? And I think we've just always been good at bartering and things like that, right? Going back to African culture, And so I think that that's part of what makes us really good entrepreneurs. I'm just going to say it. But I also do think that regarding solo, what I'd like to see more of are more partnerships, right? So Women of Color Unite, I stick to my lane. I don't tend to do workshops about teaching somebody how to write or direct or whatever. There's a reason for that. I think that that gives an impression that women of color are not ready, and we're more than ready. A lot of times when we're doing these stuff, it's to brush up on our skills, stay sharp, whatever, but that's not the way that it is perceived. So it's not something that we do. It's not something that we've really ever done, right? There is somebody, Landy Maduro, from Women of Color Filmmakers. She does that really well. I'm like, when people are like, is there a writing class? I'm like, go to her group. Is there a directing class? Go to her group. Like, I stay to my lane, right? But I send people to her group. We share a huge majority of members. I mean, you sort of belong to both. And I'm a member of Women of Color Filmmakers. She's a member of Women of Color Unite. But that's what I'm talking about. And that idea of sharing resources. When I did an LA Times article, they're like, is there anybody like you in the Latinx community? I'm like, Caden Phoenix, Chicana Directors Initiative. They interviewed Caden. Caden's like, let me take you to lunch for just giving me a shot, like, letting me do the interview. And so that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'd like to see more of, right? If somebody hit me up, it was actually a Black woman who was like, hey, an executive, and she's like, I need somebody who tells Indigenous stories. And I was like, well, she's like, yeah, I know, I could go to JTC list, but I need somebody right away. And I'm like, I don't recommend people. I'm like, but let me put you in touch with somebody who did. And I hooked her up with Dr. Jolie Proudfit. I'm like, you're going to know many more. Like, I understand this person is hired off the list several times, but they needed somebody right away. I'm like, not my wheelhouse. So I put her over to Dr. Jolie Proudfit. And Jolie helped her, right? And then Jolie hits me up. She's like, that was really nice of you. I'm like, look, a win for you is a win for me. They don't necessarily have to belong to Women of Color Unite. I don't care whether they belong to my group or Landy's or your. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is the fact that a win for them is a win for all of us, right? That's what I would like to see more of. If I'm looking at a grant, not that I've gotten, I've gotten a couple. But if I see something, I'm like, doesn't quite fit what we do, but it fits for you, I send it over, and they do the same thing for me. It's about partnerships, right? I call all of these people my partners in crime. So that's what I think that I'd like to see more of, right? So if somebody does have a hair salon and they're working from their house, and there's somebody else who's working from their house who does nails, what I'd like to see is that, hey, do you do your nail? Oh, we got a 5% discount and 10% discount. Go over there, recommend somebody. That partnerships, right? That's what I would like to see more of, right? Because I stick to my lane. I
No, and you
stick.
do it.
Right. If you want somebody else, I got you. I can recommend somebody. And I hope you do go with them if what they do fits more with your needs. Because you know what? That is still a win for me. So, what I would hope are that more Black women and women of color hook up and be
Yeah.
like, okay, so I'm running this for my house, you running this. Maybe we could get together. Some if a recommendation comes from me, maybe they get a discount. You do the same for me. That's what I would like to see more of. Partnerships.
No, I definitely agree. We need to see more partnership and everything else. I'm here to wind down and everything, but I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and I could talk to you for hours on end and everything. You bring so much fire, so much knowledge, and so much of the powerful work that you're doing. So I definitely appreciate you giving me this hour and everything. But one of the things I always try to have my guests do is give any words of encouragement you can for our global audience and any words of positivity that you can share. Definitely keeping that fire and keeping that heat, but we do know that we're going through a lot with the pandemic and just around the world. People need some sort of positive affirmation and all of that. So, what kind of positive message would you give to our global community if you've got one that you can lead them? That'll also let them know that we can move in a forward direction and kind of like create this better world that we need to be creating.
I would just say be yourself more than anything else. Be authentic. Because here's the thing, I've always been authentic and I'm still standing. You don't ever have to put up with any ism. You don't have to put up with racism or sexism or ableism or ageism or colorism or sizeism or homophobia. You can always walk away. Just believe in yourself. You'll always get a job. This industry would have told me that I would have to put up with all of that to succeed. Every time I'm like, nah, because I believed in my own talent. I believed in me. And when you believe in yourself, you don't have to put up with any of it. Feel free, walk away. You'll do okay. You'll get another job. It's okay. You don't have to put up with it. That's what I would tell people.
Gotcha. And just really quickly, I know other than the women joining the organization, I wish I was a man of color organization. Maybe I'll have to start that one. But what advice would you give to folks that wanted to break into media, whether it's film, whether it's TV, whether it's newspapers, whether it's whatever, that are going to try to follow in your footsteps? What advice would you give to the young people that are going to try to follow in your footsteps, just like you followed to some degree in your aunt's footsteps, and there are others whose footsteps you have followed in as well. So what advice would you give to folks that want to come in and do the fiery work that you were doing, better or younger than both of us?
Research, do your homework. And I talk a lot about that. So, and going to NYU and AFI, but these days with, masterclass and YouTube and all of that type of stuff, people are like, oh, should I go to film school? And this is what I tell people. If you don't study like you do, right? If you don't go to film school, I get it. Like, it's expensive. So if you don't want to take on that debt and all of that, I totally understand that. But study like you do. Study like you are in film school. Read everything. Watch everything. Go to groups. Break that down. When I have conversations with people all the time, I can normally tell whether they went to film school or not, right? And so I try to tell people, study like you are in film school. Study film theory. Break scripts down. Watch. Have conversations, go online, join groups that are discussing film, all of that. Study like you are in film school. And that doesn't mean watch a film and maybe call up a friend, right? Don't forget, I would spend up to 12 hours in school every day in and day out, right? Let alone then working on sets. Study and research like you are in school. That's what I would tell people, because it's a craft. It's a craft like any other craft. You can't just go, hey, I'm an actor. That's great. Will you please go studying acting? Right? I'm a producer. You need to work on sets, be a production manager, line producer, like understand what producing actually is. So that's what I would say. Study. Study.
That's even advice that you can give to the old heads, because I know a lot of the old heads don't have enough of a business sense as well. They call it show business for a reason, and I know a whole lot of old heads that are really good at the show part, but not necessarily good at the business aspect of it. So it sounds to me like that studying and also handling it as a business is something that we could even tell the old heads as well.
I tell people this all the time. It is a misnomer to call it show business. It should be called the business of show.
Right. Yes, it should be definitely called the business of show. I thoroughly agree with you on that, because that's the more important part. But we don't sometimes think about it. We're so busy caught up in the show part and not the business side.
Exactly. Exactly.
And we've got to get away from that as a people, I would argue. And I think that that's something that we definitely need to do more of, is actually study the business side of things. Because I know even some people that are in show business that don't have a business plan for their business, and it is a business. And they also sometimes don't even have the right people. And I'm not saying that you have to go get a lawyer or an agent for everything, but they are needed for some things. And they don't even think about that, or they think that, Cousin Bob's going to be able to do it. And Cousin Bob doesn't even have the background in it.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Well, I want to thank you for being on. I'm here to bounce you on off of here, but I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope that you can come back in the near future and share more of your wisdom, because this has been thoroughly fun and I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll be back anytime you want me.
Sounds good. Let folks know where they can reach you on Clubhouse and on social media as you head out the door.
Yeah, so I'm easy. You can follow us as an organization. Everything on Instagram and on Twitter is at the JTC list. And so that's how you can find us. And me, I am Cheryl, my full name, CHERYL_CLBP, which stands for Cheryl L. Bedford Productions. Easy enough to find. So that's where you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram and Clubhouse. Same thing, just Cheryl L. Bedford. Like, I'm easy to find.
Well, I appreciate it, and definitely glad that I was able to have this great conversation, and look forward to having many, many more. So hopefully I'll we'll do some more of these in the near future. But I do want to thank you for taking the time and joining us on this particular online dinner party, because that's what the one is that I do on every Wednesday. So I want to thank you for joining me, and look forward to having more great conversations. And as you can tell, just like a real dinner party, I like to keep it unfiltered and just let people speak their truth, because that's what I'm all about, is people speaking their truth and making positive change. So I want to thank Cheryl for joining me, and also Ms. Watson, our immigration attorney earlier, Steve Rao, who actually said that earlier today, or maybe even by now, he has found out whether the city of Morrisville has become an all-American city or not. And then also some amazing guests, including our mystery guest. So I gave the clues about the mystery guest, and y'all need to figure out who that is going to be, because I will reveal that on next week, along with my clues for the other two mystery guests. But like I said, it's somebody from North Carolina. It's not in baseball and not in basketball. So that's a clue. They're probably in hockey, soccer, or some other sport.
All right. Well, thank you very much again. And I am actually now going to go have dinner. You have a wonderful night.
It's stuck. There we go. Yeah, you're off. The thing is running. I'm just asking, do you still hold on 1 second? My headset fell out. I said, are you coming back up after I run all these ads? Because you think sounds like you went to the conversation. Are you going to go till 9 or 10 now? That's cool. I'm just gonna run 20 minutes of these commercials. So like I said, I'll just eat out. So that's cool. You're good. What time? How many of these did you want me to run? I, that's cool. That's, I will let you know when she gets in the room. Oh, should I tell Maxine what you're doing so she can bounce? The person is the surprise for Maxine? Okay. But I can tell Renee, and because he's still sitting around looking like he don't know what to do. But I'll tell Renee to go. Yeah, well, Corey left. Renee's the Renee's the only one in here. And he's gone. He's gone now before I even got to chat with him. He bounced. So yeah, it's just you, Maria, and Maxine and myself in the room right now. So nobody. Tell Maria to hold on. Okay. So you want to do that after this? I am black. You don't want me to run the rest of them? Okay, that's cool. Maria, Eric is bringing you up after this. Well, you'll see yourself come up, so I don't need to have you on the phone. So I'm hanging up. No more Sunday go. It's supposed to be. Your boy is having. Your boy is having much fun. Is it good over there? Your boys. Yeah. I wish I. Is it? Is it like the old? Is it like the old days? Cool. It's like the old days. It's like the old days. It's packed like the old days. I'll text you. I'll text you. I'll text you. Eric stretch his thing. He's supposed to go it's supposed to go 8 to 7. He's got to go into 9 or 10 o'clock tonight. All right. I'll text you. Eric, come up, Eric. Eric is not coming. Oh, there you go. Thank you.